Today I'm going to show you how I built these LED light panels so I can get better lighting in my videos. Let's take a look at the parts list. First up, I'm using an ESP32, which has built-in Wi-Fi for this project. I'm also using two of these 8x8 LED NeoPixel matrices. I'm also using a 3D printed case, as well as a 3D printed pieces of hardware. These cases were printed in black just to minimize any light overflow or kind of reflection. The front covers were printed in transparent filament. You could use white or some other light colored filament. Just remember that anything you add in front of the lights is going to change how they look. And a 3/8" dowel. I'll have links to parts and everything in the description. So let's take a look at how this is going to work. So I've got my LED panels linked up to my ESP32, and these really only use one pin. They just have a data pin to tell them what color to be. The ESP32 is hosting a pretty simple web server since I was able to figure it out. And you just connect to it using your phone or your computer, and you can change the color. So to solder everything together, I just started by removing all of the wires from the LED panels. I'm not going to be using them, they're not long enough. For the ESP32, there are 5 pins that need to be removed, 2 by the back mounting holes, and then the 3 on the power and ground pin, as well as whatever pin you're going to connect your LED panels to. I did decide after removing those 5 pins that actually I wanted to remove all of them, so I went through and just removed all of the pins on my board, but you really only need to remove those 5. And to remove the pins, I just went through and clipped the plastic support structure that's between each metal pin, and then I just used a pair of pliers to grip the bottom of the pin and heated up the solder with a soldering iron and just pulled the pin out with the pliers. These ESPs are pretty nice because there are no components on the back, which means that they could be flush mounted to something with just a few screws. The only reason I end up using a few spacers is because I need to get the USB port plugged in. So if you were to mount it the opposite direction, you wouldn't need to use any spacers. The ESP32 is a pretty nice little development board to use. It has built-in Wi-Fi as well as I think Bluetooth, although I've never used it. And they're pretty cheap. I think each of these came in around $4. I have had them for a while, so that gives you an idea of how long it took me to actually figure out how to implement one in a project. Just gone ahead and soldered the 3 wires that I need for the board. So that's a power pin, a ground pin, and a data pin. That's the green wire there. And then from the board, we'll just connect to the first ground 5 volts and D in. That's the data in. And these panels can be daisy chained together. So essentially you run one data line into the first one, you run the same data line out of the first one, and then into the second one. And then I just went ahead and tinned the wires, and that just makes it so that when you heat them up and touch the solder pads on the back of the light panels and the wires together, the bits of solder melt and stick together really easily. It's really quick. And with that, all of the soldering for this project is done. So now we can stick it all in a case. So here we've got those panels, the board, all connected together. And here you can kind of see what I mean with the single data line. So the green wire goes into the first panel and then comes out of the first panel into the second panel. To stick the panels to the case, I'm going to use hot glue. And to do that, make sure I have everything in the right spot. I just put a few big dollops on the bottom corners. You could also put some on the top, but I haven't really found it necessary. And then we'll just do the same for the other panel. And a quick note here, this could be expanded. You could add a third panel or even a fourth. You would just need to make some modifications in the code to control those additional LEDs. To mount these panels to the dowel, I am taking a M3 screw and putting some super glue on the underside of the head and then just pressing it through the hole into the top of the case so that the threaded portion sticks out the top so that we can connect to it later on. For the board, I am using some longer M3 screws as well as just a couple spacers that I printed, and they are going through the slots in the back. These slots really allow you to position this board anywhere you would like on the back. And with the board screwed on and those screws super glued to the top of the case, we can put the fronts on. I am just using some real short screws. They don't need a ton of engagement. They're not super structural. These front covers, you could also redesign them. Right now, they're just flat panels that have a few holes in the corners. If you wanted to get really crazy with a resin printer or something, trying to make a Fresnel type lens to go on the front could help with distribution as well as a little bit of focus on the light panels. So now with everything assembled, I will just go ahead and put that middle piece onto the dowel as well as each of the LED panels. And then we just put a little screw in the top to hold each piece onto the dowel in place. So let's take a look at them in action. Here they are on top of the camera. I've got a pretty intense blue on one side and a pretty intense pink on the other side. I think this gives kind of a fun lighting effect. Here it is in action on a little benchy. And you can take a look at a few of the other colors as well. This is kind of a bluish tone. And if you'll notice, it really helps to provide a lot more consistent, a lot more even light for whatever I'm shooting. Now I can kind of point the camera, turn these lights on, hit record, and I don't have to worry about everything being crazy or having to super white balance in my editing software. For reference, I have all of the lights off in this room and the blinds are basically closed. I will have links to an Inscrutable with all of the codes, all of the parts lists in the description. Thanks for watching.